It's okay? Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining this session. I hope everybody enjoyed all the sessions and keynote today, and you're excited about Databricks products. And my name is Bita Gorgiara. I'm Senior Engineering Manager with Databricks. And I have the pleasure of introducing Chris. Chris is with a company called Boomi, and they build data pipelines and help building AI agents. And today he's going to cover what their company offers and how it interacts with Databricks. Thanks.
Super.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all guys for coming, right after lunch and trying to get over to the Marriott. Appreciate it. I think a lot of people come up. I either get people to say, I've adored Boomi, I've been using it for 10 years. It is the core of how we do a lot of our enterprise framework and interconnection, or you haven't heard of us. So this is the Magic Quadrant for Integration Platform as a Service. Boomi's the one in the top right. The only one that's been up there, this is the brand new one, that has been up there for 11 years. What's really interesting is seeing some of the names that you might be super familiar with actually dropping out. And that's interesting because Gartner is now really weighing in and saying, if you're not using agentic in your platform, both to build and use the product, to monitor integrations, to help users, but also within the platform itself, that's a new requirement, and most people aren't keeping up with that. And you also see a huge shift away towards extremely high code in maintenance, and how can I go towards more no and low code systems so that I can push processing closer to the user base and the product teams. So very interesting to see this, and actually that they're even evolving now into their new framework called BOAT, which is the business orchestration and technology layer. And it's interesting, only 2 folks from this list actually were qualified, one being us, and they selected one other. We don't know who that is. What I want to talk about, though, is data ROI, and kind of what do we mean by that? I think we all know that every single company right now, organization expects to be data-driven. Everyone used to talk about this aspirationally, which is true, but then things shifted, and kind of if you're not, you've been shifting down into the bottom quartile of your industry. And really within the kind of last decade of digital transformation, that's what it was about. It was about linking through end-to-end business processes, and at the same time, we were supposed to be linking together that sort of digital chain of data as well throughout. That second part hasn't gone as well, but that's been the aspiration as people are trying to become data-driven. The challenge with that, though, was as people started doing that, building teams, getting better tooling, as us practitioners started getting more sources, getting text, graph, geospatial, document. I could keep going on with the different data types in addition to relational that we're trying to grapple with. The volumes started going up, particularly as you access some of those data types that were much larger than the relational side. And then we started getting up to refresh rates and going from 7 days down to 1 day, and then having to now move down to near real time across all of our pipelines and our data movement. And oftentimes that data isn't just acceptable with what's in the analytic layer. We're also saying, how do I actually activate that data that has been cleansed, and doing that and making that available back down into the operational layer so that it's available across applications. Then, so we have these teams trying to keep up and actually create dependable solutions, but oftentimes pulled together with 5, 10, or even 11, 12 products. And as you try to scale that up to the volumes, that creates massive challenges. Even if I'm in the cloud, I have problems when I'm trying to maintain integrations and scale at the level of these issues, moving from hundreds of gigs into terabytes, into hundreds of terabytes, and into petabytes. I'm just going to have problems. There's no question about it. And now we add on to that problem, we have agentic. Yes, it may be a promised solution to solve a lot of the ills I just described, but equally now I have to feed those systems that are building agents, and they need to be fed with data for memories, for context, and to power them, to give them that potential energy to act. So how data teams now to do even more faster is that end. Now this is interesting. I think Tristan Handy from DBT, the CEO and founder of it, and really one of the founder of modern data platform, or modern data stack probably is the proper term, is saying how right now CFOs are taking a scalpel. They've been pushing through. We did this famous post last year that was kind of sent everywhere that talked about the fact that people were going from 8 to 12 products, and CFOs, when looked at the value of that, said, no way, we're cutting that way back. Because for every one of those products, I have to have an expert, and for business continuity, I need a second or third person trained up on it, and now I'm trying to integrate that all together. And if I have a modern data stack that is running 8 to 12 products, now I'm talking about 20 to 30 people that I need up on these things. And then again, it causes issues as I try to scale and deal with new data types. And saying now we're seeing the patterns moving down to 2 to 4 products. And people are going to platform products for that reason. And it's happening across this. So let's break down, let's talk about what do we mean by data ROI. I think the easy one to look over is cost. Interesting, tech and systems, not that big of an issue. You're dealing with a lot of things that are open source. The cost is not there. But what the real issue is on that team effort, and I just mentioned that one, when I have products and I need to bring together people that are trained up on 8 to 12 products in order to build coherent pipelines with quality information, it's a real problem. And so how do I reduce that, which we just talked about, which is people are now going to more core platform products that support a lot more of the functionality that I did and shifting down to 2 to 4. As well as starting to take a look a little bit at the systems and technology. And the other one was, can we increase the value? Which is the one, how we'd increase the ROI. The problem is that measuring business value from quality data is extremely hard to do. Spent the last 3 years working at McKinsey, and we could not figure out how to really do that in a way that the businesses believed. So really the option was to reduce cost if you actually wanted to address the problem. And what most people are also ignoring is the cost of poor data quality now. And what is that? But now that's being focused on, and the core driving that is the move towards agentic. Is now most of those projects that people are doing in proof of concepts in AI, my previous history was 87% couldn't go from POC into production due to data quality issues. Number one reason we couldn't go live. It was just too hard, and the cost to fix the data was too high. You're looking at IT, looking at 5 to 8% budget cuts right now. And they're saying, how do I actually improve data quality and deliver something using AI into a project? And the answer is very few use cases meet that hurdle, because they want to pay back within 12 months. Because otherwise I can't afford it. And so how do I deal with that and move forward? Now, let's talk about the real cost here. The real cost in this, if it's not systems and technology, I'm not going to increase and be able to prove that we're creating more value. I've got to address the cost of the engineer. Globally, North America, average cost is roughly $180,000. It's pushing up as much as, it's about $130,000. But generating, if you're in Bay Area, it can tip up to $230,000, $240,000. That's salary, add 40%. So North America average, that bumps you up to $189,000 per person. So if I have to have someone who's there plus someone who's a backup and maybe a third person for continuity across a huge number of products, you can see why this got so expensive. Which is why companies now, looking at 5 to 8% budget cuts across IT, are saying, I'm going to go to a much simpler stack. And they're also saying, how can I use agentic to solve some of these issues? Because data engineers are spending 50% of their time doing maintenance of their core pipelines and of the systems. You need them to build the new stuff. You need their knowledge and their expertise to build out new systems, address new data sources. But once I get them up and running, having them run back and saying, oh my God, there was an API change, something has happened, systems go down, now you're trying to hunt down the data and find the documentation, figure that out, rebuild the pipeline to make that work, or they change the JSON, now I've got to deal with how do I extract that out, how do I flatten it and get it into the new schema change? Why don't I use AI to do that? So how would you do this? When we look at the maintenance task, how do I go to no-code authentication? Or actually just auto-generate it, use AI to read the documentation and auto-generate out the UI that does this for no code, so I don't need experts to do that. On the extraction side, don't deal with change data capture yourself. Have a platform that actually does change data capture across all the major sources and knows how to deal with that when a feed breaks and I have to do recovery. All of that is built in. How do I also adjust to API updates, automatically noting that a new one has been published, auto-read the documentation, regen the YAML, and then put that up in dev automatically for testing on a schedule? Solved problem, by the way. A lot of people are like, wow, and you're like, no, actually, I can show you a demo. On the load side, automatically generate out the DDL. Also automatically, when I start to see schema modifications required based on upstream changes to data types or into other issues, like I said, like the JSON format and how much there is, automatically modify my schema. On the transform side, give me pre-built ones, and then now that I've brought this data and moved it out of the operational systems into my system analytics, help me activate it and drive it back down automatically in the same tool set. This is where AI can have a huge impact to lower cost, because now I've taken those engineers and I've essentially made them twice as effective in terms of their impact. The number one thing I did, which was cost, not tooling, it was people, and I've made them twice as effective by leveraging AI. So we get back to Tristan Handy and back to the modern data stack, and when we do talk about its sort of shortcomings, one is the problem of integrating all of it. If I have those pieces, I'm stuck with pulling that all together. I mentioned the skill challenges already, plus the increased cost, which I kind of addressed. AI makes this much worse. And what I mean is an AI to solve and being used in building your data pipelines, I need to be using data to actually feed my agents. But now I am dealing with regulated processes, and I need all that data to be put into logs that are auditable by like Ernst & Young. How do I actually capture all the data flowing in? How do I capture all the workflows, the data out, all the transparent AI into immutable logs that I can feed back to them so that I can be leveraging AI in my work business? If I'm using 8 to 12 products, this is not a good answer. IDC also talks about this, and they're saying that their research is consistently showing that the biggest inhibitor to integration and other automation tools is the incompatibility with the integration, the API management, because APIs go directly into your app integration, your B2B, both your ETL, which is the broad data pipelines, dealing with your messaging and process automation. And that's why they're seeing this huge trend towards consolidation as well. What is the value, like how do we create that value of trusted data though? Because this is the other issue with data quality, and the cost of poor data quality was over time you erode the business's trust in the data. One is secure the sensitive data. The next one is synchronizing the data. This goes beyond master data, although it certainly includes that. Most people don't even get that right, to be honest, up front. But then begin to look at the fact of how do I take other core information that's needed by multiple systems. I mentioned the digital chain that is broken. We solved integration, but we didn't really solve the data problem. Actually go about and solve that using a hub and spoke system for putting out core data, reference data that needs to exist. And then getting ready for AI. How do we feed systems with high quality data? Now, I would argue that we're actually moving out of the age of the kind of decade of digital transformation and into the age of agentic transformation. As we begin not looking at our business from the outside, from a customer perspective, which is what really the age of digital transformation, how do I deal with end-to-end processes, but not from our internal view, from the outside view of a customer working with us. That was when we started to say, whether I'm on my mobile phone on a digital channel, whether I'm on a PC, whether Mac, whether I phone in, whether I go in store, I get treated the same way and they know who I am. That was really hard. And then they said further, wow, my customers actually want to do things differently. They want to do pickup outside. They want delivery. They want to do reserve and then pick up in store. All these different methods, and businesses have their own version. All this was about digital transformation, rethinking about our business, our integration, our systems to serve the customer from their perspective. Everyone still surviving has done this. Now we're talking about how can I accelerate processes using agents, remove redundant step. How do I take my bottom 5% of my people and make them have the abilities of my top 10%? How do I take the top 5%, 10% that maybe they know how to do something incredibly, but they only have time to do it once a month for their customer base? How do I make it so they can do it for every single customer every time? Agentic has the ability to make all your employees sort of superhuman, plus take them away from repetitive, redundant, low value tasks. And that's what the age of agentic transformation is about. But this is what you're facing with if you're on the tech side. We were already dealing with huge numbers of applications and just managing those and setting up all your data center readiness, all your backup and recovery so I can, for my business continuity. I was already barely managing that. Then we got up to thousands of data stores, particularly as you start thinking about external systems of reference, marketing data, other stuff I'm using in my digital channels, reference data needed. All of that was challenging, and then you went to tens of thousands of APIs, which became huge attack vectors. A lot of APIs that weren't getting updated, APIs that had gone stagnant, that no one retired. I have this old tech debt, and they weren't scaling well. And then so then everyone started having to build out API control planes. Agents are protected, we think are already going to be much worse. And they have the same challenges from a security and access perspective. So how do we manage all that? What you need is a platform. And I'll explain why, but agents get fed with data. They get fed with data pipelines. They get fed with APIs. They get fed with data from other integrations. They get fed from MCP servers. If you haven't heard that term, you'll now see it every day. Sorry, guys, up front laughing because it's true. So they get fed. So how do I have all that data going in? Because I need to monitor that from a governance perspective. I already talked about the data pipeline issue that we need for both agentic, but that also applies to our existing systems of analytics that we're doing. And I'm not just talking about integration, because integration systems are really becoming automation systems and workflow systems. They're beyond just making my Salesforce talk to my SAP. We're well beyond that. Now, a lot of people, just to level set, because I think a lot of people don't always agree or even know, so I'm just going to what are we talking about here? What is an agent? I'd say it's an autonomous or semi-autonomous software app to use AI to achieve goals as opposed to code, and perceiving reasoning options, taking actions digitally and physically. What do I mean by that? People will also say, autonomous, what do you mean? Well, why don't I have an agent? Why can't I just have an AI that sits there and listens to, let's say, commodity pricing events? And it's automatically tracking what my inventory levels are in all of my different manufacturing and DCs, and then automatically looking at my demand plan, and then automatically making purchasing based on that information at the best prices from the best vendors. Not a hard problem, by the way. Very straightforward. Great answer. Fully autonomous. Semi-autonomous is where it gets called within a workflow or via a UI, human-in-the-loop system. That's what we do when we go to ChatGPT and we move. It's semi-autonomous. As soon as I hit send and the prompt goes in, it starts thinking on its own, which is where you get into the fact why it's still semi-autonomous, because once you let it loose, it's thinking. Or that's how we use it. I call it a software app, because software apps they do one thing. And that's really what an agent does. I give it a goal, and it is just focused on that single goal. That's all it's going to do. I'm typically not going to, actually it's a bad idea to try to make them do more than one thing. Maybe we'll change that at some time. But they are perceiving because they think. And I want them to be more than a prompt. What I want to have, just one that listens to me, I want to inject it with information. If I'm using it within a call center, it should know what my purchase history is. It should know about my last service tickets if I had problems. If there's stuff in flight and I maybe want to do an RMA, it should know about that. It should know about how important I am to them as a company. So I want all those memories and that information imbued into that agent to be treated correctly and to also have an effective interaction with it. This is where it gets to be perceiving. Then I can give it reasoning. It can go through all the different tasks and logic and think through them. But as it thinks, it's going to need information. That's provided by tools that are fed by those data sources we've been challenged with, talking about. And then, of course, it has to be we need to unleash that power. Now it knows what to do. It needs to kick off an integration. It needs to show the results in a UI, kick that out via Slack in a human in the loop situation or into ServiceNow. Or it's got to go out, or maybe it just calls another workflow or an integration automatically. That's what we're talking about, is what an AI agent in the context of what I'm describing. So yes, it's using an LLM, but that LLM now with agent to agent, I could then call something like a constraint satisfaction or a deterministic process for that matter. So what are agents useful? I talked about it. Systems like workforce augmentation. We can do assist or replace, making people superhuman. Personal productivity. I talked about the example of an agent doing buying, but I could do it for myself and say, that's an amazing product. I'm not buying it at that price. Buy it once it hits below X price from these vendors that I know have good return policies or this return policy, and it'll do it automatically on my behalf. Business process automation. Not hard. Data management, amazing being work with GraphRag and being able to actually do security at the paragraph level, combining relational and document data, text data, all into common systems, and then using a Gen AI front ends, which gets into more simple systems, but graph systems, but RAG systems are still pretty impressive and really do have a huge positive impact. And then, of course, dealing with digital twins. Now, it was a year or two ago when people stopped saying AI for AI's sake. And yeah, everyone did it. All the CIOs went out and said, my board says we have to have agentic. So they went to Microsoft and they bought Copilot at $300 per user per month. And they built a couple agents. That happened, but right, they had to keep their jobs. And I kind of get that, actually, to be honest, because what else were they going to do? But now, that's not acceptable. They're having to say, how do I create positive ROI, or at least in year neutral, then positive payback in future years via AI? And it's interesting, though, because 73% of companies are saying it's the biggest game changer in their business. Not a game changer, the game changer. Yet 2% of them say that the agents are fully accountable. You still have people clutching onto their deterministic ways, even though not recognizing humans are doing a lot of the work and aren't actually following process. But also, and so what this tells you is if you're going to work with companies, you can only move at the speed of trust. You're only able to roll out agentic as fast as the business is willing to accept it and you prove out that agents work well. So how do you do that? Boomi as a company is focused on making that 2% into 100%. How do we make the agents completely trustworthy? And that data within things like regulated workflows, you're completely covered when Ernst & Young shows up and audits your books. And you're like, yeah, we did our manual journal entries and automatically reconciled with the systems. We approved all our expense reports. And yeah, here's all the information you need to know about why that fully met our regulatory concerns. By the way, at Boomi, we do almost everything in our finance department using that. So we do agentic throughout our workflows. We use agentic throughout our support desk, our product, HR. We do it. Every single part of our business is running on agentic. So what does Boomi Agent Studio do? This is generally available today. Most people like to show screenshots of stuff. We're actually in full production with what the analysts are telling us is maybe the most complete version 1 they've seen, period. Design agents with confidence. So number 1 is, can I go in and easily create an agent that can confer any task, that can access all the data sources I need and pull that in, allow me to build out a complete model with all of its tasks and do that with confidence in how it's going to behave. That is fully embedded in ethical guardrails and automatically doesn't require experts how to stop against things like malicious and prompt injection. It does it for you. How do they then go around and get the governance required so that I can do those things in the finance department? How do we actually centrally register agents? Now, by the way, you don't need to use a Boomi agent. Now, Boomi is typically using Anthropic underneath, but you can actually select your model. More than that, you can create agents. I can create things with Bedrock and bring them in and register them. Several other platforms outside of AWS are going to be supported shortly, but I also can build my own agents and register within the platform. We are the opposite of a walled garden. which is really the problem. Everyone's trying to lock you into their system, and we're saying, no, don't get locked in. Use a common platform, and I should today go, today we're using Anthropic and we're using 3.7. Yeah, in QA though, we're just heard about what's happening with, let's say, O3 Pro, which yes, as of yesterday came out, and everyone's like, I want to test that out. I shouldn't have to recreate all my data pipelines and API access into that and then tying into my workflows. Can I test it out, and if I like it, say move to production, and it's a new version of that agent? And then say, actually, there's better, lighter weight agents that are industry, line of business specific that I would rather use, less costly, faster response time, and I'm getting a better answer. Great, try that out. I don't want to be locked in. I need a platform that supports open, not closed, not walled gardens, and has all the audit ready so that I have the immutable logs when the auditors show up. That'll allow me to then orchestrate. If I can tie this into automation and applications, allows me then to really start to allow this frictionless business. Now, when we talk about it, these agents, and I've mentioned a little bit, the way I like to think about it is an agent, you have a basic LLM, I want to imbue it with data, and this is creating it and lifting its potential energy. The way you give it potential energy was data from APIs, web services, events, integration, data pipelines, files, master data, and then of course MCP. How do I do all that? Now I've given it an immense amount of potential energy, but what I need is kinetic energy. Kinetic energy, movement, light, heat, that comes from taking your agents and dropping them into your workflows, into your automations, into your integrations, into your custom applications, all from a common platform. There we go. And this is what we have. So Boomi there, we have Agent Garden, which is where I manage agents. I can go Agent Designer, which allows me to go in and do no-code agent building with drag and drop. But I can also go in and I can also register third-party agents, like I said, automatic integration with Amazon. If I want to load it up, I can build. We have Agent Marketplace where we have certified agents, not thousands of anyone wants to build. People build business-specific ones. We test them, and then they're available for free in Agent Marketplace that I can drop in. And then we have Control Tower, allowing me to have complete management, observability, and full governance of agents from Boomi and not from Boomi, all in a common control plane. So let's see it work. Because I think most people are like, I kind of like the idea, but I don't have a mental model because I've never seen something like this. So imagine I have an integration for like e-commerce or shipping generally, and that system is hard-coded, so it doesn't deal with all of the potential use cases, and I want to replace that with an agent system. Now the problem is when I get to the point of where I want to automatically build an agent, I've got to provide it data. So the first thing, this is just an example of one, an agent has failed, someone realizes we need to build an agent, this part's less interesting. So here's the integration that somebody has, and there's a hard-coded step that picks the shipper, and we want to replace this with an agent. So we're going to go into Agent Builder. And as I mentioned, agents are defined by goals. So I'm going to pick one, I could pick one from the market, and I'm going to type in the goal. It's just the sentence, just like you do in any LLM. What is the goal that you have that you want to build? In this case, I want it to go out, look at, say, this is the product and the customer wants X. They need it within X time frame. Here's how important they are to me. I want to then go look up how much does that thing, what distribution centers is it available in? What are the size of the box? How much does it weigh? And then I want to check out via web services all the different shippers to get it from them to the customer's location, figure that all out, and then make the best decision based on timelines and cost, and weigh that out and ship that, and then update that into the shipping, into the ERP, and notify the customer. That's what I want the agent to do. So I have a goal, and before I go further, it's a simple step. I set up the profile, I define the tasks where I link the tools, they give it the data, I provide incremental guardrails beyond what Boomi injects automatically. We, by the way, now can also start to include memories. This is about 3 months ago. And then ultimately, I have the ability to do full QA and trace on that agent before I decide to do anything with it. So again, it's more AI, and you notice it was automatically filled out. AI is helping me build the agent based on the goal I did, but then I can edit that. So I'm editing the task, linking in tools like APIs. This case I didn't, but I will in a second. So I'm going to add a new task to notify customers of delivery. Here's the different steps it might deal with. And now I'm going to add tools, and I can do APIs, build custom prompts, go out, get master data, deal with integrations. I can go to MCP servers in the current version, all the way through. And now that I've saved it, I want to test it. So now there's a test, and I can type in questions. I can also do full trace of the entire system. But now I want to deploy the agent, which means activating it, giving it that kinetic energy by dropping it back into the workflow. So I go back into integration. By the way, if you don't use us, you can just create an API and access it. It's not that hard. You create an endpoint, API endpoint. So I'm going to take away my hard-coded one, take the agent, drop it in, and I'm going to pick the shipping agent, give it its new name for this workflow, and that's it. This is all it takes. You can build agents in about 5 minutes. Now the problem is I have to manage that in production. So this is our control plane. Amazon Bedrock, like I said, several others are about to come out. I don't want to say whom, but how am I going to manage thousands of agents? So we use anomaly detection. So start to highlight which ones might be misbehaving or someone might be using maliciously, and that's automatically built in. Then I can go in and start to look at the trace data on those things, look at what tools they're accessing, what might be causing problems. I can further go in. Now I'm going to take a look at, we're looking at the tools. And now I'm looking at more detailed performance data, number of token usage, time, input, output. This is also what we're using for our anomaly detection. And then if we see something we don't like, I can kill it. So in this case, we're disabling a Bedrock agent because it's not behaving properly. This is 3 months ago, so this is all generally available, and we are releasing new code on the system almost weekly with new updates to the system. So it's pretty incredible. This is the only system that has all these capabilities, particularly on the governance side. So number one, when you're looking at this from a corporate, I don't want to build something. A lot of people are saying, well, I could custom build a lot of this. The problem, what you're effectively doing, if we're going to end up with thousands of agents, if you're building custom coding outside of a POC environment, is you're creating technical debt. I need to start thinking, how am I going to make it that easy to drop in agents? And they're not, let's say they're API. You don't need to use our API management. That's great. Just register your stuff that you built with Kong and Apogee so that it's available in the platform to drag and drop in, and we'll monitor it and put that into the logs so that you have the proper data and traceability on it. Don't want to use our workflows? That's fine. Create an API endpoint and access them. So, but how do I have universal governance with ability to look at agents both built with Boomi, although we're using other, you can pick which model you use when you're building Boomi's agent builder. But beyond that, to register ones you build outside of Boomi. Powerful tools that access data, and we have the largest set available. And then looking at no walled gardens. I can use anyone's agent that I want. We do not believe in vendor lock-in. And then getting into the fact that no code, because especially when your company is dealing and moving towards like product operating model, I do not want a bunch of people doing extremely high code low in the organization. I want to push the people doing the building of agents to the people working close to the business, the people that are building the business applications on the product teams. Therefore, I want a system that enables that. Not that I won't have a few of them built and really construed by somebody deeply technical. I want to do both, but I want to make sure I have the ability to have a majority built close to the teams. That's why that agent builder, which we're being told is roughly 65% faster than anyone out there to build agents, is so crucial. So that is how I spoke about how to use AI within building out my data pipelines. Everything I talked about there today, you can do with Boomi. Now, a lot of people are saying, you guys did that, but you didn't do that long ago. And that was because we acquired Mastery. And Mastery had an incredible tool to actually help build out SaaS-based platform to build out data pipelines. And then we've tied it into our system and then imbued it with huge amounts of agentic technology to build out the workflows and do the capabilities I just gave there. So it's one common platform across. Beyond that then, how do we then, how do I automate and use AI to make sure that everyone who's working on the data platform side is working on incremental value building versus maintenance? And then how do I then also take a look, and using, a lot of that is using agents, how then do I actually then use and build agents to actually accelerate my business and do that in a way in which I'm not accruing technical debt, and that which is going to allow us to be able to use this on fully regulatory workflows, HR, finance. I could keep going, but all these things, especially if you have companies in the EU with the EU AI Act, they're even making you have the capabilities I just talked about on things like predictive maintenance. You're like, really? I know, I was kind of shocked on that one myself. But that's what the platform already has. And this is what has people so excited about, and why kind of Boomi now is on the short list on like top 5 of when people start talking about agentic platforms, is the capabilities and the governance that you see here, and our sort of strict adherence to being Switzerland and not tying ourselves to anyone's platform. So with that, I thank you guys all for coming. Thank you. Give a feedback survey. The conference would be very, very grateful, as would we. And I really appreciate your time for coming out here. Is there any questions anybody has?